Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so excited to have you, especially on this World Teachers Day. We're so excited that you're here. We're seeing some great responses coming in the chat. Mrs. Griffin sounds like a great teacher of mice and men and change her voice. Yes, that's the best part. I love reading out loud to students. Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. As you can see, tonight's webinar is all about reaching students where they are, especially those absent and lost students. So we're going to talk about how we can support them in the modern classroom. Let me get that. So I want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Lisa Doty. I'm one of the program managers here at the Modern Classrooms Project. Before that, I was an instructional coach and taught elementary, middle school, and was an instructional coach. It's been a long day. So I want to welcome our guests. So I'm going to kick it over to Lindsay and Amanda. If you'd like to introduce yourself, sorry.
I'm Amanda Arbuckle, and I teach second grade in Concord, Michigan. And I'm excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Armbruster. I'm a middle school 6th grade and 8th grade health education teacher in upstate New York.
Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie. I'm a program manager here at Modern Classrooms, but before that, I was a high school biology teacher, all levels, for 9 years.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started with our agenda. So tonight our plan is to talk about those challenges that affect our students, especially related to absenteeism, and talk about how we can support their learning, whether they are at school and some are at home. I know that some students may have to quarantine, but absences occur for all kinds of reasons. And really our goal is not to talk about the what and the why, but really the how of to support them. We'll hear from our panel of experts here. I am joined by an all-star cast. I'm super excited and I'm glad that you're all joining us too. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. If you're familiar with the Modern Classrooms Project, you've likely seen this graphic before, where we know that we've got a wide range of student abilities in our classroom, whether students are on grade level, absent, below proficient in math, below proficient in English and reading. And we know that that represents a wide swath of students. And so 20% of the students in our classroom say that this is too easy, but then we've got an 80% left over that is 20% saying that they can't catch up, and 60% saying they're lost. And that this isn't a traditional model. And we know that that's just far too many students that are needing support. And that's why we developed the model of the Modern Classrooms Project. And the truth there on World Teachers Day, teachers take this very seriously and take it to heart. And we feel like, oh my gosh, we're not meeting our students' needs, and what can we do to address that? So taking a look deeper in this presentation, we're going to focus on the catching up part and the lost part. What can we do to reach those students where they are? And again, if you have been with Modern Classrooms Project, you're familiar with our model of blended instruction, that self-paced structure and mastery-based grading. If you're new to the model and haven't seen this before, I invite you to go over to learn.modernclassrooms.org to take a look and look at all of our resources. Consider that free course option where you can learn all about these three structures. So the challenges for the absent student, these are straight out of the mouths of students. They're worried about that loss of instruction, and so are the teachers who support them. They're worried about missing a lot of content. How in the world am I going to make this up? Going into a movie late, or starting a movie at home that's too late, or walking into a meeting late. We've all been there, and it's terrifying, and knowing that we might have missed something. And so students feel that way when they've not been at school. They want to know if they're doing the work correctly. When they've missed that instruction, it's difficult to recreate what the teacher says and does, because we know as educators, some of it is on the fly, and we are reading the room and seeing what the students need. Another concern that they have is that social disconnect and isolation. I've got a 7th grader here at home. And so much of what she shares during the day has to do with that social piece. And FOMO, that fear of missing out, that's a real concern for students. How are they going to, if they're absent, have the opportunity to connect with their peers? And as we see in the chat, we know that teacher relationships are important to us and very lasting. So those absent students, you know, they miss their teachers, and what can they do to connect with them? And then taking a look at equity. How do we make that learning loss and making up that missed content? How do we make that equitable for our students? They might wonder, will my needs be met? How am I going to get support if I don't have it? How will I even get my work? And how do I know when any of that is due? So we want to focus on that loss of instruction, making it equitable, and how do we make those connections with students? So we're going to dive right in to that blended instruction piece. And remember, that blended instruction is that teacher created content. So here's a concern that we have. So my student is frequently absent or absent for long periods of time. How in the world can I make that up? Let me check if I skipped past a slide. I didn't. There we go. And so how do we address that when a student has been absent for a long time? I know that I once had a student go on a vacation, so it wasn't for an illness or anything related to something like that, but gone for 2 weeks. And it is difficult to make up that 2 weeks of time. And I wasn't using that model at that time. So it's very difficult, right? So what we want to consider with the Modern Classrooms project model, how can we leverage the power of that blended instruction? Well, we know that we can create an LMS overview video, giving them a tour of what our system looks like. And I'm going to invite some feedback from the panelists here in just a moment, but I've got some links in the chat, or not in the chat, but in the speaker's notes. So when I share this slide deck with you, you'll get a lot of resources to help you with all of these points here. But creating a tour of your LMS, how can I access the content? Where do I turn in my assignments? Establishing deadlines. How do I even know where to start? How do I know what's expected of me? And then how do I make that content and those resources accessible? So I'm going to stop and invite your feedback. Amanda, do you want to jump in? How do you use blended instruction to support your students?
For me, because I teach second grade with my littles, it's a lot about building independence in the classroom before they're gone. So that's something we work a lot on. Can they access their logon information? Do they know the codes to get into our Google Classroom from home? So we really work a lot on independence. And I like that you put in there, create an LMS video. That is something that I do at the very beginning of the year, and I share regardless, so that everybody has that information before they need it. Because then I just think it makes that transition so much smoother as they move forward. And I would say the other thing that I really work hard on for preparing for students to be absent, or if I think they're going to be absent, is and I know we all do this, but relationship building with the parents too, not just the students, because I feel like if I can get the parents on board with me, then they have more buy-in, and often they're willing to do the extra legwork that it takes when their student is absent. So I really work hard on relationships with the families, and I think that that sets us up for success, you know, if they're absent.
Great. Lindsay or Debbie? How about you?
I would echo that. LMS overview video is super important. I create one for my students regardless. It's kind of like my introduction. It's part of Unit 0 in my classes. So they start off with, here's how we use this. And I share that video with the families. And so all of the parents can see and understand how things run in our class. And it can kind of run seamlessly when the kids are at home as well. So that is really fantastic for when, so, and then kids can access videos wherever they're at, because I just post them on Google Classroom through Edpuzzle for any content, not just that LMS overview video. So that foundation of understanding the process through the, how does this class run, helps kids and families to understand how the class runs, and then they can be successful whether they're at home or in school. Or I had a student start the school year in Canada, and she was able to kind of jump right in because it was all available. The other thing about blended instruction, especially for kids who are frequently absent or absent for a long period of time, all of the videos in every lesson in every unit, I can send the rest of the kids off to go and do their thing. And I can sit and work with that student who has been out. Maybe they're out of practice, and we can sit together and chat and work together while everybody else is being productive. So blended instruction definitely makes that ease to and from school, back and forth, much easier on me, on families, and on the kids, of course.
It certainly answers that question, like, did I miss anything? You know, when they walk in the room, what did I miss? So this certainly would help with that. Debbie, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, honestly, to echo everything Lindsay and Amanda just said, I used Canvas. That was my LMS. And the very first unit in my Canvas was unit 0. And I encouraged all of my students to, so I had module restrictions where they had to view each item. So they had to view the LMS overview video. They got to practice how to read the tracker, how to find class resources, what is a mastery check, and practice those skills. So by the time they jumped into unit 1, which opened after they view all the items, they already were comfortable with how to use Canvas, how to leverage those resources, how to find their work, how to submit their work, and get into that routine from day 1 in a low stakes kind of activity. And to echo what Amanda said about families, my school that I worked at did have high absenteeism. So leveraging family support was huge. It was really, really important. So I had a Google Voice number that I would text parents like the week before school started, just introducing myself, letting them know they can email me, they can text me. Whenever their student was absent, you know, I would just shoot them a quick text saying, this module in Canvas, I sent you an email with further details, but too long didn't read. Like, here, please let me know if I can support you in supporting your student anyway. So that was kind of how I made sure that the families were supporting me on the back end, right? And I can support the students in the front end in class. So definitely leveraging that family support and getting them to understand Canvas and how it worked as well, so that everyone was on the same page. So no matter if a student was absent or not, they knew exactly where to go when they came back, what to find, and how to reach me for support if they were stuck on something.
I think that's so important. You're saying how to reach you, because it's great that we're throwing, you know, putting all of this out there for them. But if there's no open line of communication, if they were to get stuck, that is, you know, not going to do a lot of good. And so it reminds me of this story, this real situation. This wonderful educator in Massachusetts told me this story where she had a student who during the pandemic traveled to the Dominican Republic to visit family, but ended up stranded there and couldn't travel back because of all of the restrictions, and rolling blackouts were occurring. So internet access wasn't always super reliable. And Sarah was saying how because of the LMS overview and because of the very clear communication, how to get in touch with each other, she was able to support the student for the duration of last school year. And the student came back and was ready to move on to middle school. And this story is so amazing to me that this far away, she was able to use the model to support that learning. So you mentioned, Lindsay, about the student starting in Canada. What about Amanda or Debbie? Do you have any similar experiences?
Oh yeah, I think about just pre-pandemic. I've always worked at Title I schools, so I've worked with you know, populations of like students who are refugees or whose parents are diplomats, and I would have students who would leave for their home country for 2 months. And you know, pre this model, I'd be printing out like worksheets and packets. I'm like, 2 months? Okay, let me do some unit planning for the next 2 months so I can print out the packet and give it to you. But this model has just been a godsend because they can just access the work on Canvas at 2 p.m., 2 a.m. this week, next week, it's there. They can work at their speed. Last year during the pandemic, we had one student who was finishing her senior year in America from Brazil, super excited to kind of come to our charter school, and she was stuck. But, you know, just kind of teaching her how to utilize the LMS, she just kind of transitioned. I mean, I felt like I've had her for 4 years and not just her senior year. And she was still able to like access that work, seek support, collaborate with her peers, which was a really, really huge fear of mine. The senior year, you have no friends. How do you kind of come in and not only access the work and get to know your teachers in a new school system in a different country, but also collaborating with your new peers? And she was really able to use this model to her advantage, and she loved it. all the way in Brazil. So now I have a student in
That's
Brazil that I
awesome.
can go visit when, flights open up fully again.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I had a similar situation where I live in Michigan, and then the student moved to Arizona last year, and it worked beautifully, even with second graders. So it just goes to show that the model can work with seniors all the way down to our little ones.
I love that.
It also works with older kids. I use the model, portions of the model with distance learning with college students, graduate students. And so it works with them, and they are not all over the country, but we don't meet in person all the time. And it works extremely well with older students as well.
And do they receive it in the same way as a K-12? Do they enjoy it? Do they feel like, hey, this works for me and there's lots of freedom and flexibility?
Yes, a lot of my students are very frustrated with the fact that you have to master something before you can move on, because they've grown up in a culture of just get stuff done, just get it done.
Mhm.
So that's an area of frustration, but it's also a great opportunity for talking about learning. And I'm teaching
Mhm.
future teachers. So that's a great conversation for us to have about the fact that our job is to teach and their job is to learn and not just check things off a to-do list. So that's an area of frustration, but it's a good one.
I would agree that learn by doing, that's challenging. That's fantastic. So looking at another aspect of using that blended instruction is supporting students outside of school. So maybe they're not on a different continent, but they are certainly outside of our classroom, and we can only control so much of the student's experience, but that doesn't mean that we can't influence learning outside of the classroom. And so again, here we can support them with an LMS, but also support the families. But what if the student gets stuck? Right? So do they know what to do if they're outside of the classroom? So I've found like a student guide to be helpful, where they know this is like the digital equivalent of the 3 before me. So I'll check my notes, I'll rewatch the video, I'll read the discussion board, I know who to ask for help. Make sure those are very clear procedures for your students, and then make that content and all those resources accessible to the families. We've talked a little bit about that, but I'm curious, outside of the school day, maybe they're not absent for an extended period, but outside of the school day, how do you continue to support those students?
I have my Google Voice number that I kind of mentioned that I share with my families. I also share with my students as well. And you can download Google Voice into your phone. So it's kind of like the separation of church and state, kind of keeping some kind of, personal life. But my students would text me, and they know that like when the street lights come on, I'm going to bed. I will get to your text no later than like 6 a.m. the next morning. But it was a way that they were used to communicating with texting to reach me with questions. Even if it was just a quick like, hey, I finished my work. When you get a chance, can you review it so I can get the mastery check code and do the mastery check? For students who needed a little bit more support, I utilized Flipgrid. So Flipgrid has a great tool with moderating where other students can't see the videos, and they would just leave me quick questions and also share their screen so I can see exactly what they're looking at, and I can just respond straight to that video as well. So it was just another great way for me to kind of communicate with students quickly and support them and show them where to find any particular resource they're looking for to help them kind of master and reach mastery on the assignment.
I've started to build like a library of like quick tutorials of me making instructional videos of kind of how-tos, like those common questions that come up when kids are out of school or working on something at home. So I've started to build that library that I have. I haven't fully shared it out with students yet. I kind of have plans to like create a Google Classroom topic that's resources or how-tos, but at the same time, I don't want to get too impersonal. I still want students, if they're struggling with something, to come and reach out to me. Our students are very comfortable, sometimes too comfortable, emailing their teachers at all hours of the night.
Oh yeah.
So I tell them my school email goes off at 3:30. You can email me, I will get back to you. But because of the self-paced model, they know that they can catch up or they can work on stuff and be back on track in the next day. But those emails that they get to me, I will then send them one of those tutorial videos if they need it. And then they can watch that, figure out their problem, maybe the next morning during a study hall. And then they can kind of troubleshoot, but also because of the self-paced structure of the class, they're not like, oh my gosh, I'm so behind because I didn't get this done last night. Because Mrs. Armbruster didn't answer your question at 10 o'clock at night because I'm going to bed.
Yeah,
And
because I have
Amanda,
little, I'm sorry. Yeah.
sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, what about you?
Yeah, because I have little kids, I try to streamline everything. So we use Google Classroom as our LMS. So for the kids to reach out to me if they're not in class, they just use the stream page in Google Classroom and then post questions to me. They can also post questions to their friends, and that has been super helpful. Like one student might say, hey, where do I find? And then other students can comment on it. And that's like the ask three before me kind of thing. And then I use Class Dojo to communicate with parents. So they have me, and they're really good about trying not to reach out too late because their babies need to go to bed early too. So I don't really have to worry about that as much, but the kiddos use Google Classroom and then the parents use Class Dojo.
That
I
made
think
me
that's
think
incredible that they're 6 and 7, and they can handle that. That's incredible. Debbie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
that made
Oh,
me
no.
think of, Amanda, what you were saying, like using they can ask their peers with the Google Classroom stream. I'm not brave enough to open up comments for middle schoolers because they just have ridiculous conversations and they're entertaining, but very distracting.
Yeah.
So I post my grouper, which in modern classrooms language would be the public pacing tracker, but I post the grouper in each class's Google Classroom. And so if the kids are having trouble with something, they will access the public pacing tracker and say, oh, Amanda mastered this, I can reach out to her. And most of our kids are connected in some way, shape, or form with somebody in the class. So if they're really working on something outside of class time, then they can use that tracker to figure out who to connect with.
Yeah, I like that.
Fantastic. I had a story very quickly. I ran into a student at the gym, and she's a junior now, long out of the middle school setting, but you could tell she was struggling to get through a math problem. She was like looking at me, and I'm totally gross, and I walked by and I stopped and I said, do you need some help? I didn't teach math, I taught ELA, but she said, you're not working. And I said, a firefighter would not walk past a fire and ignore it just because they are off the clock. What are you working on? I haven't had to find the area of a trapezoid in a very, very long time, but because she had I said, a teacher in your backpack, she had the video with her, we were able to troubleshoot that teacher's instructional video, go through the notes, and I was able to help her. And she was super excited. And I told her I was going to share this story, and she was even more excited. But she had a plan. She knew what she needed to do. She just needed a little bit of support. And so I think that's, kind of what we're hitting at here is how can we use that blended instruction to support students outside of school? So we talked a lot about these points here. But if a student were to come back into the classroom after they've been gone a long time, do they know where to enter the unit? Yes, it sounds like you've communicated that very, very well. But what if they've missed so much that we need to modify? Is that an option? Definitely. So you can focus on the must do of the lesson, or of the unit rather, and get rid of some of that extra content, the should do's and the aspire to do's, that if it doesn't work for your student in terms of time and what they really truly need to master, it is okay to customize that tracker for your students. You can even make an alternate one that doesn't look anything like their peers, and that's just fine. But the goal is to figure out what they need to master the unit content, and then use that tracker, like Lindsay was saying, to and embrace collaboration. How can they find support with their peers? And then how do you connect as the educator to reconnect, to recenter that student? They've been out. It's difficult to swing back into a classroom setting if you've not been there for a while. So I'm curious how you do that, how you acclimate students back to that classroom environment.
I can go. With our little students, we use a daily tracker, but it's like per day, because things need to be chunked a lot smaller for little kids. So they have like a Monday self-pacing tracker, a Tuesday self-pacing tracker. So what we do is we just have them, just like you say, go through the must-dos. And then sometimes, you know, depending on the circumstance, if it's a student who struggles a little bit anyway to kind of keep pace with everything, then we'll sometimes eliminate a couple of those too. I think it comes down to knowing your student and meeting them where they are instead of just being rigid and not flexible. So a lot of those they're just conversations that we have with the students when they come back.
I would agree. The same thing with my middle school students. When a kid comes back from an extended absence, if they haven't been working outside of class, then when they get back, they're just going to really focus on the must-dos. And we have that conversation. And I love what you put in here, Lisa, about fostering collaboration with volunteer student experts. I kind of take a different spin on that. I haven't implemented this yet, but one of my colleagues in my school has been, where so that she, the teacher, can work with those students who have been absent and have been quarantined. We've had a lot so far this year already. She has kind of taken the checking mastery checks and other things like that to work with the rest of the class, the kids who have been there, so that she can focus on the kids who have been absent, to have, like Amanda said, those conversations to get them back on track. And then once you've had that, in like that really good high quality time with those kids who are coming back to school, then they find success and they can go off and do their thing, and then everything can go back to normal until the next kid is absent and comes back.
That relationship piece is so important. You know, you have to reconnect and kind of settle back in. And I think what you're saying here is just so powerful, having that opportunity to keep the others on their path, but also have the chance to talk to the students who've been gone. That's awesome. So checking for mastery, this is one that we've gotten questions about. How do I do this if a student is outside of my classroom? If they're absent, do they do the mastery checks at home? How do we know it's them actually doing it? Do we wait until they come back? So I'm very curious what your experiences have been. One way that I know that folks do it is using collaborative opportunities, like maybe you as the teacher will respond to their work in a Google Doc, and they, you know, respond back to you, and you get a feel for what they know. We've seen use of platforms like GoFormative, Flipgrid, and then mastery checks that would be exit tickets, like little paper exit tickets. What you see pictured here, it's in a digital format. So I'm curious, how do you approach supporting those absent students, whether they are learning from home or coming back after a period of time? How do you support mastery for those kiddos?
I would say I use all of those options that you've listed there, except for GoFormative. I haven't used that. But I would add in the place Google Meet. A lot of times my mastery checks, if I have the time, even in person with kids, is a conversation, and I ask them some questions that they would traditionally write out on paper. And so when I have a kid who is absent, I will set up a quick Google Meet and say, all right, let's see what you've mastered. And it's just conversational. And we talk about it and we talk through things, and I can gauge their mastery from that conversation. Some kids, that really freaks them out to be one-on-one with a teacher. They've gotten more comfortable with it. But it's a little bit intimidating. I can understand that. So I do always offer, if you want to just do a written one, that's fine. But I feel like a lot of times they also want that time with another human being because they're stuck in their house. I'm talking about kids who are quarantined. They're stuck at home and they want to talk to someone other than their family.
I agree with you, Lindsay. I think there's a lot of power in just communicating with the kids face to face. So we would set up Zoom meetings. We did also use Google Forms in second grade, and the kids got really good at submitting the forms. And then it was nice because if they didn't master it, I would just reassign it to them and they could submit it again. We just make sure that they can submit another response. So we would do that. And then also Seesaw for little kids is great because the kids can post their work and voiceover, where they can video record it. And that's really helpful. And then I can voice over my feedback, and I can also video record my feedback to them. So they don't have to worry about reading the feedback at home. They can actually see me, hear me, and it's more personal. So
yeah,
that probably really supports early learners too, those early readers. Fantastic. Go ahead, Debbie. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, my LMS, I can do question banks. So my mastery check's only 4 questions. I can build a bank of 25. That just kind of pulls from that bank of questions. And, it also allows, like everyone was saying, they can record their voice answering the questions, so audio responses, upload a video of them doing the problems, answering the questions. And I usually check in with students before I give them the mastery check code so that we can kind of go over the lesson assignments together and make sure they've really practiced and mastered the practice assignments before doing their first or second attempt on the mastery check. So it kind of gave us an opportunity to do a quick feedback, quick check-in, like, how do you feel? Kind of like some SEL time with me as well. And I would give them the code before they do the mastery check. So even when students were at home and quarantine, they knew they could text me or email me for the code, and the code changed every day. Sometimes the code would just be mitosis with an exclamation point or with a hyphen or a period. I just changed the punctuation, and they really appreciated having that time to just, oh, I didn't do the ed puzzle. Let me go do that now. Oh, like I got a 5 out of 10 on the practice assignment. Let me revise that to make sure that I really understand it. And so having that check-in before the mastery checks was something that they really appreciated even when they were at home.
I just
We
want to
talked a little bit about, oops, sorry.
I just wanted to say, like, in my experience with Modern Classrooms Project and hybrid teaching and virtual teaching and in-person teaching, I really don't feel like checking for mastery changes that much in person versus not in person. I just really think the model lends itself really well to whatever situation somebody is in.
Yeah, I agree.
That's powerful. And, there's all this technology now. And even since we went to this largely technologically based platform a couple of years ago during COVID school, it's evolved, and these platforms are constantly updating. And Edpuzzle, for example, has enabled an audio response feature. And so, these quick mastery checks, they can add and elaborate and explain their understanding, do a little bit of that reflection. So I love how diverse your approach is, but it all distills down to that same, understanding what they've learned. That's great. You've talked a lot about collaboration and how to incorporate that, whether or not students are in the classroom. We've talked about these shared documents, posting the tracker, identifying students. So I'm curious, in addition to this, what have you tried? Amanda, I really, really like your game board. So what can you tell us about what we're seeing right here?
Okay, so with younger students, they need to know explicitly when they can work together and when it's an independent work time. And our kids, I think even older kids, they're very visual, right? So I added those little kids playing on the side, so that icon on their game board lets them know, oh, this is a group activity, I can do it with a friend. And I think one of the big things for me with blended learning is the importance of still having opportunities for the kids to get off their computer and to interact and become good humans and learn how to share and cooperate and have substantive conversations about what they're learning. And so I try to incorporate a lot of hands-on things that drive home whatever my teaching point is. So that's kind of what I do. But now we have to practice those skills and routines often, so I don't just put it on the game board and expect that they're going to know how to play the vocabulary game with a partner and be able to do it successfully. We spend a lot of time just practicing how to play the game together and how to put the materials away and where they go and what you do when you're done and how you move to the next one. So it's a lot of explicit teaching to get to the point where I can have those icons on the game board and know that my kids are going to be successful with it. But collaboration is huge for me. I think the kids need to work together.
I
love that, Amanda.
You're teaching middle schoolers, because all of those things get taught to middle schoolers too, over and over again.
What about you, Debbie or Lindsay? What was your experience like, or what have you tried and used as far as collaboration goes?
Oh, I love Flipgrid. I love Flipgrid so much. At this point, Flipgrid needs to start sponsoring me and giving me like money for how much I talk about Flipgrid. My kids I teach big kids, right? So I teach 16-year-olds going on 25. And they love being on Instagram and they love filters and, they love making the little reels and the TikToks, and Flipgrid just allows them an opportunity to feel like they're doing social media stuff, but really they're doing content-based things. And you can moderate where other students can't see particular students' videos, because I had some students with 504s and IEPs who were very uncomfortable sharing their image. And so I would moderate, their videos. But for the most part, they would post the videos kind of explaining a different concept and content. And students would respond with their own videos, and they would add filters and props to kind of make their videos more engaging and kind of get that at-home collaboration, particularly during pandemic teaching when we couldn't be together. It was almost like I was still sitting in class goofing off with my students, but still teaching and learning as they were making these really cool like Flipgrid videos, explaining whatever lesson that we were on. So that for me was one of the biggest collaborative tools that I used during distance teaching was Flipgrid. I love Flipgrid.
I second that. Flipgrid, it rocks my socks. It's so great. There's so many possibilities. And that was one of those tools that has become so much more robust in the last year or two, with so many other features to make it so engaging for kids. But also so pedagogically sound. It's just a really, really great tool. I love, you put it on here, shared documents. Like the Google Suite is fantastic for collaboration, regardless of where you are. You can be sitting next to a student, or you could be across the world from a student, and you can still be working in real time on the exact same thing, and leaving comments for each other, and tagging. Now that you can tag people in documents is amazing in Google Docs. So that's all written, but it's a really powerful tool that I use to ensure collaboration in my classroom. And things like Jamboard in the Google Suite is another one that, regardless of where you are, you can come in and be a part of that whiteboard collaborative tool. So there's a lot of really great stuff out there that makes collaboration possible. But I also think it's really important what Amanda was saying, to allow for collaboration that doesn't involve technology in the classroom. Obviously, that's not going to happen when somebody's at home, but making sure that we balance collaboration, technological collaboration, and paper and pencil games and manipulatives and things like that, because that's an important part of learning too.
I would also say, like when my kids were online, we were hybrid last year. So I had some kids that stayed online and then some students that came in. I tried to do a lot of Zoom calls where the kids at home could do the project with my students. So like we do an Oreo stacking competition every year to incorporate graphing and a lot of other math skills estimation. And so I would have a Zoom call and I would invite my online kids to join in the stacking at home at the same time that my kids in the classroom were doing it. It was optional. So if they didn't feel comfortable, they didn't have to, but if they wanted to, they could. And then I always make like Animoto videos. I know Animoto used to be a thing a long time ago, but I still love it and use it just to kind of show what we're doing all together so everyone can feel a part of our culture in our classroom.
It's so important. Even younger students need that connection. And I think older students, adults, like I was talking earlier, touched on FOMO, that fear of missing out. It is just exploding, understanding what folks go through when they're not part of a group, what happens in the brain based and needing to be involved. And even at a distance, that need doesn't go away. And it sounds like, there are so many tools to make that possible. So I love these stories. Questions. We do get a couple of questions that come in often, so I've included those here, and then we're going to open up for the Q&A. So the first one that we get is, what can I do tomorrow to support an absent student? What can I do that's quick, easy, that I can put together to support that student who has been absent? What would you say?
I can start. The first thing that I would say to support absent or lost students, I love videos, which is a good thing because Modern Classroom Project uses a lot of videos. But for kids who are out, I make a personal video to them using their name. Hi, Amanda. I'm excited to put this together for you. And I send that video to them and their parents. And that personal connection, it's all about the relationship, sets you off on the right stage. The other thing to support absent or lost students, implement the Modern Classrooms Project model. If you're not already implementing the model, then that is like literally, you can't do it tomorrow, but you can start tomorrow perhaps.
Sure.
Really, you don't have to do much different in the modern, if you're implementing the Modern Classrooms project to support those absent or lost students.
Yeah, I'll
Okay,
add
I
on
love
to
that
that
video.
too. Yeah, for me, the tracker was huge. I used the um, the auto pacing tracker on Google Sheets. And it was just amazing for my students who are absent or lost and their families, just to visually see, okay, majority of the class are green here and I'm red here. I need to do X, Y, Z so that I can also be green to catch up with the rest of the class, and they can see, okay, these are the must do assignments, these are the should do. So for now, because I'm behind, I'll skip these should do's and focus on these concrete assignments that I need to really understand the content, and just sending that tracker home when they're absent, in particular, of like, hey, I see that you're on lesson 1 and the rest of the class is on lesson 3. So make sure that you're doing the ed puzzle and this practice assignment to get to the green. Green is what you want. And students love, they'll do an assignment and text me, I just finished it. I know, I just, can you update it, please? Update it right now. So they love seeing that tracker move. And even their families have started texting and just saying, Rashawn said he turned it in, but the tracker's still red. So I need to know what's going on. And that tracker, I think, is one of the most, is the greatest thing you can do tomorrow to support an absent or lost student, having that visual reminder of what your lesson outline looks like and the student progress for them to visually see as compared to the rest of the class. And you don't have to use their real names. You can use initials. I used initials as well. So students didn't feel like, they were being targeted or singled out, but that would be the one thing that I would do tomorrow.
Thank you.
I agree with Debbie and Lindsay. I love Lindsay's idea of making a personal video for each student. I agree. My suggestions are relationships. That's like number one, relationships with the students, relationships with the parents, and however you can build that relationship. And I would also say, I know in years past, I've been really good at relationships at the beginning of the year, but then, we get busy and things get hectic. And so just stressing the importance of, even if you think they have it, even your all-stars, just send those messages of affirmation to the kids and to the parents, because we all love to know that we're doing a good job and that we're cared for. And I think as the year goes on and things get harder, just continuing to build the relationships is so paramount to the success of absent students. And then for me, for the littles, I would say keep teaching independence. A lot of times we can think our students know what they're doing because they fake it really well, or they have a friend that sits next to them that can log them into their computer. So I'm really intentional about making sure my second graders are as independent at those sort of things as they can be. So just stressing that in your classroom, that the kids can log on to everything on their own, that they know what to do if they have a question, all the things we've talked about tonight.
Fantastic. What kind of special planning? What kind of special planning must I do to support an absent student?
I don't think there's any special planning. Well, let me speak for myself. I don't feel like I did any personal special planning, right? I think using the model really forced me to sit and not just think about the next lesson, but the unit as a whole and flesh it out, because you're going to have students who look at the unit, finish all 3, 4, 5 lessons in their sleep in one night, and then you're going to have students who need time and a half, right? So it really forced me to kind of do some backward design and sit down and get the unit going. And I think most teachers are doing that, right? You're kind of thinking about, here's the unit, here's the summative, how do I chunk it to get to students to be able to ace that summative assessment? So I think as long as you're really thinking through your unit, what your lessons look like, how your mastery checks support students in, achieving, whatever proficiency, rubric you're using for the summative assessment, do that, because then when students are absent or lost, you kind of already have those assignments to give them, to target them and support them and reorient them to where you want them to be by the end of the unit. So for me, don't think that's any special planning. I just think it's just doing what we as educators already do.
I agree. There's really no special planning. Once I started implementing the Modern Classrooms project model, there was no special planning for absent students. It forced me to really focus on the basics so that I can flesh out the must do's, the should do's, and the aspire to do's. And that really helps absent students because then that when they're just doing the must do's, that they're doing the absolute essentials. And kind of on the flip side of that, for quarantine students who are stuck at home in their bedroom, I'm finding a lot of my students who are quarantined are rocking this. They're totally going above and beyond must do's, should do's, and aspire to do's because they're bored and they're stuck at home and they can't do anything. So a lot of the kids, because of the planning that comes inherently with the model, is supporting kids for exactly what they need. So beyond Modern Classrooms project model, no special planning for enrichment or supporting absent students in my world.
Yeah, I agree. You wouldn't need to do much. I mean, if you already have an LMS video explaining what to do when students are absent, if you already have all those things in place, then you should be good to go, and it should be a pretty smooth transition.
They're all great responses. It makes it sound possible. So if you are new to the model, that I think is the biggest piece, that it is possible, and doing chunks of it at a time. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, which do I start with first, find what can you connected with from anything that we talked about tonight, and start there. Start very small and then move forward there. We are now going to open up the Q&A. So we certainly invite you to drop whatever questions you have in the Q&A, and these lovely, wonderful on World Teacher Day educators are going to answer our questions. So I invite you to please drop that in. Are you able to do that, everybody? Hopefully we'll get one question so I know that it's working out there. We'll give you a little think time.
There's one thing that I wanted to bring up kind of along these same lines, but what if a teacher is absent? And this model or quarantined or whatever, this model has made my sub plans 10 times easier because the kids are so used to the model and they're so used to the process, and they help each other with everything. My sub plans are basically the kids know what to do. So for me, as a mom of 2 kids and as a human being who might have to be quarantined or sick, this model has really alleviated the stress of substitute plans. And I send my LMS introductory video to our subsystem so the substitute can watch the video to get kind of a sense of what goes on in my class, so they have an understanding. And I give them the tracker, the paper checklist that my students get, and I say, this is where the kids should be. So it's a good model, not only for absent students, but it's also a good model for absent teachers.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Yeah. Big agree. Lindsay, sparkle everything you just said. I would also add, sometimes for every class, I would add particular students' names on the list. Like, if you're really stuck, go see, this student, she'll help you out. She'll kind of show you where everything is and, help other students. But yeah, it definitely makes, these AirPods. It definitely makes everything just so much smoother. Knowing that all of your resources are where they're supposed to be, and students know exactly how to grab them, how to complete them, how to turn them in without you physically having to be there to control everything. Because I know, what's the old saying that, a teacher takes a day off and she spends a week making up for that one day she takes off. And I feel like this model lessens that statement a lot.
Yes.
Not to mention coming in at 5 a.m. to make your copies, and you've got sick children at home, and they never get sick at convenient times. It's always at crazy times of night. That's awesome. We had a thank you in the Q&A, so thank you for joining us. You certainly had a choice to be here and join us tonight, so thank you for your gratitude and coming on. We've got the Q&A open. We're happy to stay on for a little longer. Your evening is yours, so certainly if you need to head on to your evening, please do so. But we've got time. If you'd like to drop a question in, we'll give it a little bit more time. I loved, Lindsay, that you talked about absent teachers. I I should have added that to my slide. I didn't even think about that.
Look at that,
Great.
collaboration at its finest.
Right? Live organic collaboration. That's perfect.
That's what we like.
Exactly. Oh, goodness. Okay, so Kim is asking, I know you said to start slow. Any suggestions for a high school math teacher? Debbie, you were high school and you were science. There's a lot of math and science. So Debbie, please take this one.
One of the suggestions that I can make here is, and if you've been teaching high school math for a while, you might know their particular concepts, whether your students are high or they struggle often, that all students struggle on. So I would start with maybe making just quick video, like how-to videos, like here's an example of how to practice these problems, so that students kind of have that as a resource. So when you're not available or if they're absent, they know where to go to kind of grab that video to, I don't know what you teach, so I'm going to go with Algebra 1. Oh, I'm really struggling with finding X. How did she do that in class again? And there's just like a quick 3-4 minute video of you kind of going over how to find X like we did in class, that they can just often go back to review and help support them in their practice assignments. So I would say if you're starting off slow, just kind of thinking about what are the major topics that students struggle on, and just making quick how-to videos for that, for them to access throughout the year, because they're not just going to need it for that unit. They're going to need it later on when they're, adding skills onto the basic skills that you taught earlier in the year. So that would be my suggestion.
As you talked about that, Debbie, it reminded me, I just explained that story. That's the only way I was able to help that student standing there in that moment to figure out the area of a trapezoid, was that instructional video. I don't know that I would have been able to jog my memory looking at her notes, because they were, teenage handwriting notes with all kinds of stuff on it. But that video from the educator, that's hands down, I would start there.
Oh yeah, and that's why I said Algebra 1. Throughout the pandemic, I supported some of the Algebra 1 teachers, and you know how to find X, but how do you explain to a student how to find X? So those videos really came in clutch for me to also review of like, okay, and then you divide both, got it, and help them out.
Oh, we've got some chat. Yay. Hi there, Tony Rose. Thank you for joining us, Tony Rose. Tony Rose also works with us here at the Modern Classrooms Project. She's amazing. We can stay on for a little bit longer if you have any questions. We'll be wrapping it up here soon, so we'll stay on for a couple more. Anything else, Amanda, Debbie, or Lindsay, that you would like to add? Thank you for being here, first of all, but thank you. Anything else you'd like to share with us?
I'll just say, I don't know if it's the elephant in the room. I think we talked about it a little bit before, but I feel like this year is even harder than last year. The kids coming in, the discrepancy is huge. And I just love that Modern Classroom, for quarantine students, for in-person students, for slow students that are struggling to catch up or didn't have much schooling last year. I love that it allows me the flexibility to work small group with kids even more than I traditionally do with guided reading groups and all of that kind of thing. So I feel like I'm able to plug holes because of this model a lot more efficiently than I have in the past. And then, normally having students out of the class, in the class, out of the class, in the class would really throw things, but it really allows me a lot more flexibility to manage my students and to help them meet where they are. So I think that's huge.
I agree. I think during all of this pandemic learning, whatever situation people have been in, kids have lost a lot of things, but they've also gained a lot of skills that they wouldn't have gained otherwise, and a lot of technological skills.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of and some kids have really, really thrived and flourished with executive functioning, organization type things. But some kids are really, with a year and a half of craziness, year and a half plus of craziness, some kids are really struggling with those life skills, those self-management SEL skills. And I feel like not only are my students with this model, not only are they learning content, but more importantly, they're relearning how to be good humans. Amanda, you said earlier, good students, good learners. And this model really fosters that, and it meets kids where they're at. No matter where they are physically, we're meeting kids where they're at. And I think that's much more powerful than I've been teaching since 2004. And this is the most powerful instructional approach that I've ever encountered. to help kids be good students and good humans.
I saw a tweet this morning, I'm going to botch it, but to paraphrase was not focusing on what they've lost, but coming back and teaching differently. And I think that's what I hear all of you saying, and educators who are, using the model is just like, there's an awareness, we are moving forward, and how can we use this to the best of our ability to address the needs that we have, but also because it just works really, really well. And it's exciting to see all of these educators coming together and sharing. So if you're not on social media, I'm not a big social media, it's like a teacher Twitter. It's just really, really cool and inspiring, honestly.
Yeah, I'll say that this model even goes beyond. I feel, it definitely came in clutch pandemic distance learning, and it goes beyond that. I've taught in schools with just, high absenteeism. Students kind of have their own issues and their own problems going on at home and in their lives. So they were always in and out of my classroom. And with this model, it really helped, because when I'm, working with, my small group students, working with, my students with disabilities, working with, my students who are higher order thinking, I feel like my absent students come back and I can't give them as much attention because I'm too busy running around, spreading myself thin, working with all of these other groups. And this model has really helped, because no matter whether they're absent for 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months, I kind of get the classroom routine of, okay, well, she's busy working with the student. Let me open the tracker. Let me see where I am. Okay, let me go into the LMS and open that and at least attempt to start that. And then if I have a question, who's a lesson? Okay, so Dylan was a lesson superstar. Let me go check. They get that routine and they just kind of pick up, and they don't feel discouraged. I feel like that was the huge issue that I had before this model. My absent kids would come back. They feel discouraged. They're like, well, I'm like 3 lessons, but what is the point? Forget it. I'm not even going to try. I'll take this class over the summer. It doesn't even matter. And I feel like this model, they want to try now. They want to attempt. They want to put their best foot forward and seek support when they feel challenged. And that's all I can really ask for my kiddos.
Well said. Well, to honor everyone's time, we'll go ahead and bring it to a close. If you've joined us tonight, thank you so much for coming on tonight. You will receive an email tomorrow with a link to this webinar as well as the slide deck. So all of the resources we've talked about will be linked within that slide deck. So don't worry if you didn't get those jotted down. We'll provide that for you tomorrow. Thank you for all of the kind messages. We're just, yes, blended learning, universal design for learning. Yes, I'm seeing this come in the chat. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. We'll hang back if anyone has questions, but you're free to go. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Amanda, Debbie, and Lindsay, all stars. Thank you so much.
Yeah, anytime. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you.